Home Abstract and Title Company was founded in 1867 and is the oldest company still operating in McLennan County. Home Abstract is comprised of a team of honest, friendly, hardworking professionals dedicated to providing both commercial and residential real estate clients with the highest level of communication and service. Their team is committed to working hard and building and maintaining strong relationships because transactions are so much more than just deals. They are clients, deserving of the courtesy, care, and respect that Home Abstract and Title Company is known for. Visit Home Abstract and Title Company at homeabstract.com.
Cross the Brazos and Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn. Cross the Brazos and Waco, I'm safe when I reach San Antonio.
All right, welcome back to the Waco History Podcast. This is the Crossroads episode, and we continue to learn new things about the ways in which Waco served as Crossroads, right, Rick?
I absolutely agree. In fact, a few weeks ago, we had the opportunity to go to KWTX and do a quick interview to promote the podcast. Mm-hmm. And while we were there, we got to meet Brady Taylor. He came in and said he was a fan of the podcast. I'm like, well, hey, if there's two people out there that actually listen to this thing, we got to get one of them on.
That's true. That's so, listener. That's one of the rewards for listening is you get to be a guest on the podcast. It's a small enough group that we can carpool and do things like that.
But the other side of that was, as I thought about this theme of Crossroads, our weather in Central Texas, and if you think about it, I mean it really it is. Central Texas is a crossroads for the weather that's going on in a lot of parts of the nation, and it's had a huge effect on how Waco has developed over the years. And I thought, man, that's a worthy subject for a Crossroads podcast.
It is, but even as you talk extendedly there, you're a host, not a guest. And so I'd like to welcome our guest, Brady Taylor. Thanks for being here, Brady.
Oh, my pleasure. Like I said, I listened to the podcast, actually stole some of y'all's guests before for a documentary we're working on. So, yeah, great to be here.
Well, please go ahead and tell us about that because I'm excited for the premiere that's coming next month.
Yeah, so we've been working about the last year on a documentary for the 70th anniversary of the Waco tornado. It's going to be called Monster from the Sky. That was what a lot of people referred to the tornado after it hit. And, it'll be on air on KWTX the day of the anniversary, May 11th. And it's an hour-long documentary, and it should be pretty good. We're happy with what we put together and really telling the story of the people that lived through it and also just seeing some of the insane damage that storm caused as well.
Right. So, we have Brady and John Morris on. They're like voices. I mean, they have they're trained voices for this business.
They show us to be the rank amateurs that we are. So Brady, would you please talk about yourself a little bit? I mean, I think a lot of people are familiar with your face and your voice, but tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I always joke with people I've got a face for radio and a voice for newspaper. But I've grown up in Central Texas. I graduated high school out in a little town, Goldthwaite, out on the western edge of our viewing area. Went to Texas A&M, got my degree there, so a lot of Baylor fans probably get mad at that. But then I came to KWTX all the way back in 2005. So I started here right after graduating college, lucked into a job being weekends, and then kind of stumbled into mornings after a few years. And 18 years later, I'm still here. And so now the chief at KWTX. And it's like you said, Central Texas, the Waco area, such a diverse area when it comes to weather, and I think it's perfect to kind of fit in that Crossroads kind of a view of everything.
So why weather? What drew you into that career?
It's funny because when I was a kid, I always wanted to be an astronaut, and then I always joke with people, I just didn't make it all the way through the atmosphere. I still stare into the sky. Actually, when I didn't actually decide I want to do meteorology till I got in college. I actually want to do computer science. Then I figured out I didn't like computers that much, but all I do is computers now. I stumbled into it in college. I actually went to junior college for my first semester, and I was sitting in the library just kind of killing time and picked a book up and was like, hey, look into this. It was weather, and it caught my interest. And then I sent an email to a meteorologist up in the DFW area, expecting him not to reply to me, and just kind of like, hey, this is interesting. What about it? And he helped kind of push me along the way and ended up doing that. So, it was never planned until I got in college, and also didn't want to do TV when I first did it. And then I kind of stumbled in the TV side. So yeah, kind of a weird path to get to where I got to.
Right.
And A&M's got a great program.
Yeah. You know, A&M and actually Incarnate Word, a small school down in San Antonio. Those are the only two that have bachelor's degrees in meteorology.
Right.
So it's a pretty small kind of degree you can get. A&M and OU are kind of the big ones in our area. Texas Tech has a master's program, but once I got my bachelor's, I was done with it. I was get to work.
Well, you know, one thing I love about that story, you mentioned that other meteorologist really helped you out. And I think a lot of times we don't realize as professionals, maybe further on in our career, the power we have to help someone else who's trying to figure out what they're doing with their life. And man, I would encourage our listeners, when you get those opportunities, take them, because you can have a profound effect on someone's life.
Oh, and it's true, but it also makes you feel old when you've got now interns that work with you or at other stations and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it'll make you feel old quick.
I got lots of reasons to feel old, but that's okay.
One of the things that I noticed recently, I was looking at kind of activity with the podcast, is we have a lot of international listeners. And so, I mean, you can't assume everyone knows the climate we're talking about when we're talking about Waco. So maybe we could begin with just a little bit of a general description of.
Well, and I would say even define the difference between climate and weather.
There you go.
Yeah, so you know, when you think of it as like you're a school kid, all right. So you get a daily grades on your stuff. That's kind of like your daily weather. So weather is more what's going on now, short term look. Then your climate is more, well, if you make a bunch of grades, no matter what it is, they're going to average out to kind of what you normally should see. So we always joke that the average temperature of the climate's more just the average of a bunch of extremes, because, so Central Texas really this time of year is known for just wild and crazy kind of weather. But, we're kind of your blend between where we're located with the Gulf of Mexico not far away from us, but also you get out into the desert Southwest. We're kind of in that transition zone here in Central Texas. So we pick up the kind of the wild different types of weather. We're also on the kind of the southern end of what you would call Tornado Alley as well. So we get a lot of severe weather. But honestly, what we term as Tornado Alley now is kind of shifting with the way the climate's been. You know, we always talk about Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, but now Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama have been getting a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
So we're in that, get a little bit of everything kind of climate here in Central Texas. So we get your summer heat. We typically don't get crazy winters, but it's been that way the last couple of years. But, we get a little bit of everything here in our weather in Central Texas.
Yeah, as I was looking at some of the stuff that's out there about the climate, we're actually seem to be right on the border of, to the east, a subtropical climate, and to the west, an arid climate.
Yeah. Yeah. Waco, kind of that I-35 is the dividing line. It always, and it's funny, we actually did a project about 4 years ago just talking about, having fun with the I-35 line, why we see such different weather. But yeah, for our KWTX viewing area, it's about 100 miles east and west of I-35. You go that far, you can vary on average anywhere from 12 to 16 inches difference in rain.
Wow.
And you can see, you go from, the more dark black soil where you're more old time, where cotton farms and stuff like that, to our western counties where it's, caliche dirt, mesquite trees, and, your
limestone rock.
Yeah. So it varies. And then you look at just the elevation change. We don't think about that here because we're pretty flat, but we have a 1,000-foot change over our area as well. So that plays into it
Right.
across how much it changes in our area.
Right. So when we think about the literal crossroads, and we talked a little bit before in an earlier episode about the road system and how it developed, and one of the things in just further reading about contemporary sources as they're talking about traveling through Texas in a wagon. I mean, you're looking for flat ground, but another major challenge was swollen rivers.
Yeah.
So it seems like if you're going to draw, take the best of both worlds, or try to thread the needle, that I-35 corridor where you've got the flat ground, because if you go any further east, you get to broken ground, right? You get to the hill country type stuff that's a lot harder to traverse. And you go any further east, you get more and more rain. And so it's kind of the needle to thread it, where I-35, obviously started as a trail and developed into an interstate over time. But there's a reason it's there. And
yeah, you can track all these cities along the fall lines there of those rivers, those rivers that kind of bisect Texas. they all had a fall line at some point, and you can follow it right up to go through
and
San Antonio and Austin.
And Waco known for, if you look back at the history, that it was kind of a low crossing point there, but it also had just crazy floods that had big impacts as well.
Right. And then climatically, you think about the idea of Waco being part of the Old South in the cotton economy. Looking at, it's not true now because we have irrigated crops and we've got better varieties, but in the 1800s, 30 inches was the minimum amount of rain it took per year to have a cotton crop. And we're right on that line, right, Brady?
Yes.
Kind of where do we kind of sit in that?
Yeah, and that's where, like I said, Waco is kind of exactly that dividing line. We average in the 30s, but we'll have a lot of years where it's 20 and sometimes where it's nearly 60.
Right. Yeah, but it's an average.
Yes, and that's why you see a lot, you go I-35 eastward, you really see a lot more of that, dedicated farming land. But you go I-35 west, just west of Waco, it transitions quickly from farming that maybe more now irrigation done to
ranch,
ranch land where
ranch and pasture.
You're lucky if you get some coastal that you can feed your cattle with.
Yeah. Goldthwait, y'all probably didn't have a whole lot of.
No,
maybe in the bottoms had a little bit of farming going on, but
honestly, there it was pecan trees is what we had in all the bottoms. So, you get out there, you're growing hay, peanuts, and stuff like that was about all they got away with growing.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing to think about too. I mean, the other major part of our crossroads, the Brazos River, as it comes through town. As it goes east, as it comes from the west, it doesn't have a traditional snowpack or something else feeding it. It's coming out of a desert, arid environment. And I think it probably, I'm not a hydrologist, but
you're going to go ahead and give a hypothesis.
I am. Well, just the.
It comes from wizards.
I mean, we have a bunch of dams now that help regulate the flow. But think about in the 1800s when you didn't, and you were just counting on what rain happened upriver.
Yeah.
And so you could go. I mean, it was feast or famine, right? I mean, it could be flooding the banks or barely trickling, just based on what's going on west.
You still see that impact with the lakes here in our area. I mean, Lake Waco's down to nearly 50%. The Bosque River feeds that, and you can go parts of the Bosque nearly dry, and even further south down into parts of Bell County, their rivers, the Leon and the Lampasas come nearly due west. So, a lot of times we'll see rain in parts of our area get good rain, but if it doesn't fall on the right spots on the river or too much gets in the river, then that can either bring it up real fast or drop it real quick.
Yeah, so I teach American West is one of the classes that I teach. And one of the fun things about the 19th century is there's a lot of pseudo-scientific beliefs about the weather in the 19th century. One of my favorite ones that boosters liked was an idea that rain follows the plow. The idea if you go and plow land and kind of release the water from the soil, it'll create the overall rainfall. And so there's these periods where the 1870s and things like that where they're getting above average rain. And it seems like it's working, but there's these periods of bust, and so we are on the edge of cotton culture here, and of course all the things that it's interesting, all the things that weather, the fact of that climate determines with regard to society and culture and economies and things like that has a huge impact.
Oh yeah, and then this area is just known for kind of that boom or bust when it comes to rain. I mean. There was a famous meteorologist worked up in Dallas. His name was Harold Taft, and he always said a drought ends with a flood, and a flood ends with a drought. And you can look back at Lake Waco's levels, and it's just bouncing around. And that's where climate versus weather. You average it all out. Yeah, we average a certain amount of rain, but it comes in just largely varying. And like I said, when the crops depend on it and stuff like that, it becomes a major impact. And plus, just the Brazos River and the amount it can or used to be able to swell. And the major impacts it had on the city of Waco as well.
Right. Okay, so we're talking a lot about moisture, but there's other parts of climate. Prevailing winds. I mean, kind of what's that look like for Central Texas? Because we're so affected by the Gulf.
Yes, if you step outside, typically in the spring or summer, you're gonna feel that. And But that varies a lot as well. You know, you ever go to College Station in the summer in August? You don't want to be there. You know, that's how much humidity.
I don't think I ever want to be in College Station, but that's
that's a whole other episode.
Yeah,
and the direction of the winds play a key factor. You know, you get the southeast winds that brings in the moisture off the Gulf of Mexico. You get a southwesterly wind that's coming off the plateaus in Mexico and the mountains there. And even just a due westerly wind will bring in dry desert air as well.
Right.
So, yeah, the direction, I mean, typically we see a south wind a lot of times here, and that pumps in the muggy air into central Texas. But quick shifts in the wind can cause just dramatically big changes in our weather.
I love the picture of a lone tree out on the prairie, and it's always leaning to the north, right? Because those south winds come in the growing season, and that just kind of pushes all the trees have a little bit of a northern bent. Okay, so that same weather pattern, I mean, that brings a bunch of storms through here, right? Thunderstorms. We talked a little bit about, tornadoes, that kind of stuff. So what's that look like? I mean, there's kind of seasons for that, right?
Yeah, typically our severe weather season, we won't call it that, typically runs on normal from about April to early June. It's becoming a little more that March is trying to jump into that as well.
Right.
And then we can sometimes get a fall severe weather season as well. October, November, depending on how the weather set up. So yeah, typically our stormy time and our rainiest time of the year is in April, May. May is typically our wettest month, and it's one of those where if we don't really catch good in April and May, that's when you get the big drought concerns in the summer, because unfortunately it's going to stop raining in the summer.
Right.
Typically August and September, all of our hopes are on something tropical moving in. The Gulf Coast is rooting against the tropical systems, but that can sometimes bring us really big rains, depending on how a hurricane or tropical storm, how it can move into our area.
Right. One thing is I was looking at contemporary sources again about how weather affected life in the 1800s and prehistory as well. Something we don't think about today, where those thunderstorms brought lightning, and when you had a primarily prairie grassland type ecology, that would trip or set off lots of prairie fires, the lightning strikes, and which then reinforced because the grasslands would burn. It would burn off the woody vegetation and keep it in the grass would grow back quickly, and it kept it open prairie for millennia. But we're starting to see now there's a lot more trees because we don't allow that to happen anymore.
Yep. You get the cities in there, and then we know how to fight fires a little better, and changes that whole dynamic for sure.
Yeah. But that was part of the ecology and the climate prehistory. So
you mentioned earlier, Brady, and obviously we all know this, and this impacts Waco's history in a real way, as you were talking about earlier. But what are the conditions that place us in that tornado belt? Is kind of, I mean, what are the elements that kind of come together that create the circumstances that make it likely here? So
when we talk Tornado Alley, we're in the area, so we're close enough to the Gulf of Mexico that we get those southeasterly winds that roll in, and that pumps in the humidity. So that's your kind of your fuel for thunderstorms. You need those hot, muggy kind of days. But then as you go west, you've got, like I said, the plateaus and some of the mountains in Mexico, and then the Rocky Mountains, you get really cold air coming over that, and you get the setup where we are and up towards Oklahoma and areas like that. We get these sometimes pretty dynamic storm systems that will roll across the central parts of the country, and that sets the kind of the ingredients together that we can get those big storms that develop. But a lot of times we're kind of right on that line. You'll hear a weather term called a dry line that we talk about sometimes, and all that is a weather system pushing drier air into kind of close to the I-35 corridor. That's funny because it's another one of those kind of cutoffs for that. Depending on how much it's rained in previous years, varies that humidity rate, but that dry line can march towards the east, and that's ones that just fire massive storms. Typically, the dry line won't produce widespread rain, but it produces really, really, really big storms. And then another factor we get with the weather here in our area, you'll hear us weather guys use the term the cap sometimes. We get warm air moves out of Mexico, and it'll actually put a lid on the atmosphere. You go up, and what happens is we'll get these hot, muggy days, and us weather guys will be, we got a chance for storms, and then it'll be sunny and completely clear. Well, you had enough fuel, but it couldn't break through that layer.
Hold on, I thought you guys were just doing that to give us just a
it's usually his tea times. He's trying to get us off.
Oh
the,
yeah,
off the course.
He's trying to clear the course. That explains it.
I've got the worst job because you don't root for bad weather, and I don't want it to happen. But then if I say it's going to happen, it doesn't. Then people get on to me as well. But yeah, those days like that, it's kind of like if you boiling water on a pot and you got the lid on it, and it's just bouncing and hitting off there. You pull the lid off, all that. Knock the mic. All that hot air comes spilling through. Well, it's the same thing on those kind of days. The fuel's there, and if it can go off, the bomb, it's just like a bomb going off. And we were talking about the 53 tornado, and that's where a lot of people were talking. That was a drought year, so everyone was rooting for rain. They wanted rain really bad, and you'll hear stories from people back then of just it looked like clouds were going to the heavens. How much those clouds are blowing up that day. But we another deal we deal with here in Central Texas compared to the Panhandle, Oklahoma, and stuff like that. People, the worst thing we always have is everyone wants to go out and look at the tornadoes. Yeah. But we have so much moisture here, we get what's called high precipitation supercells or rain-wrapped tornadoes. So you'll never even be able to see them, but it's there. But there's just so much moisture in the air, and that's something else we dealt with at the 53 tornado where no one ever saw it. It was just a big wall of rain. Unfortunately, with that was 200-mile-an-hour winds as well.
We can skip around chronologically a little bit here because I'd like to go ahead and go in and talk about the Waco tornado. You've spent a lot of time over the last year kind of looking at that event and looking at the impact of that event. And so I'd love to, I don't want to steal the thunder of the production, but I'd love to hear some of your takeaways from it after spending so much time.
Yeah, I'd always known about the tornado. I mean, in some of the basic stats, if people didn't know, it was the deadliest tornado in Texas history, 114 people. It actually goes down as the first F5 tornado ever. Now, the interesting fact was they didn't start rating tornadoes till the 1970s. So there was Dr. Ted Fujita that studied and tried to figure out, what kind of winds caused what kind of damage. And then the Weather Service started looking back, and they were like, all right, we know this one was that strong. So it's the first official one in the record books. But yeah, it was a beast of a storm, and it touched down near Lorena at about 4:00 in the afternoon. Now the difference, this shows the differences in just population. So it went through Lorena, went through Hewitt, and didn't really do any damage. I mean, there was barely any people that lived in that part. Yeah. If that same storm went through now, we'd probably be talking more about residential damage than downtown damage, because once it moved into downtown, it was 4:40 in the afternoon roughly. And you think in 1953. A lot of families only had one car, so the wife would come pick up the husband or whatever. So there were a lot of people on the road coming to pick people up or people getting off work, stuff like that. It was about 1/3 of a mile wide when it went through downtown, and couldn't pick a worse place to hit in downtown, right at the intersection of 5th and Austin. It was interesting when I was at the Texas Collection looking through newspapers and stuff like that. The Air Force at James Conley Air Force Base was doing some test runs. So they were flying bombers over different areas of Central Texas and practicing like they were dropping bombs. And they picked Waco, Mahia, and Temple. And the areas they picked what would be the most kind of important areas to practice. If you look at the picture in the paper, the bullseye was the 5th and Austin. So, the busiest area, not great construction. The Alico building, the Roosevelt Hotel took direct hits, but they walked away fine.
Right. They were pretty modern buildings.
Yeah, steel construction and stuff speaking, like that.
Yeah.
But when you look at the RT Dennis, the Paget buildings, those were the two most significant. Looking from the outside, they looked fine, but it was wood buildings, brick facade, no steel inside of it. And, there were several buildings that survived downtown that were built that same way that were just outside the path, that were torn down within a few years later just because they weren't structurally sound either. But yeah, it was all the ingredients that you need for just a horrible situation. And it was, that's why it goes down to such a major impact. And you still see, it's crazy to think 70 years later, you can still see the scars downtown that storm left. Go to 5th and Austin, there's a parking lot right there next to the Alico building. In that one block between 4th, 5th, Austin, and Franklin, 60 people lost their lives just in that one area. So, yeah, it was a devastating storm that, couldn't hit a worse spot at a worse time.
So is that typical for tornadoes to go south to north?
On average, if you had to pick a direction they normally go, it's southwest to northeast. That's just the way. So you would think with the winds at the ground coming in from the southeast, but as you go higher up in the air, our jet stream winds, typically we have thunderstorms, will move out of the west, or So the thunderstorm actually is feeding off of winds higher up in the sky.
Okay.
Now, that's the norm. Now, you can go back to 1997. There was the Gerald tornado. That was another F5. That one moved due south. And the crazy thing, that one was moving like 10 miles per hour. So you could just nearly park your car and watch it as it moved through. So those are the two strong ones. That's what's crazy when you look at.
I think you could have even outrun that one.
10
I mean, that'd be
miles.
tough.
I can't do the math in my head.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
had a tornado behind me.
And I'm sorry, I was looking at Steven when I said that. So
Yeah.
I mean, Brady's much more
Brady.
fit.
No,
Brady,
no.
no chance. I mean, for sure, Brady could outrun it.
no, I would be inside, probably hunkered down, trying to make it through on something like that. But yeah, our typical movement is kind of the way that tornado moved. But if you look at it, it was moving from southwest to northeast, but it actually turned a little bit downtown because it hit, where the old Cotton Palace was. It hit Katy Park, but then it turned back to the northwest a little bit and went over Franklin and, and then eventually Austin. Pretty much, I don't know if it did a direct hit of the suspension bridge, but it hit that. And that's one cool thing that we talked about in the documentary. I never knew that if they wouldn't have stuccoed it, due to the flooding that we had along the Brazos, the suspension bridge may have not survived the tornado.
Oh, wow.
And, you
Interesting.
how much that would have changed just the history of Waco. Because, I mean, the Alico building and the suspension bridge are kind of the two things you look at.
Well, the path you described, we're sitting in right now.
Yeah, it would have been really close here.
Was this building original to the?
I don't know. I don't know how this
350.
building is.
I don't know.
But
But
this would have been at least on the edge of where
we're
they
near
were.
Cotton Palace Park. So
Yeah,
I would
so-
feel better. Yeah, in fact, I remember when we did the episode on Cotton Palace Park, there were actually 2 fatalities at the park. There used to be a swimming pool there,
Yeah.
and there were 2 people that hid in some of the old structures that used to make up the Cotton Palace,
Yeah.
and they were
The
killed.
sad thing with that day, so you get a mixed report of some schools let out early, some didn't, because the early morning they were given warnings that there was the potential of a tornado. I mean, this is again 1953. Our closest, the Weather Service didn't exist, and it was the Weather Bureau, but the office that covered our area was all the way in New Orleans, so they covered a huge area. And it was just about that time they were even starting to mention the word tornado. They didn't, it was the science of it. Radars weren't quite around where they didn't even know the radar feature that we track now in tornadoes, what we call a hook echo. They didn't even know that was what you could see in a radar that could produce a tornado. So, yeah, I mean, some of the schools were talking about, okay, there's a chance of storms. We're going to let the kids out early. Others weren't. But honestly, when they let the kids out, they just thought they had a free day. So like I said, somewhere at the, Cotton Palace area, there was a recreation hall downtown called the Torrance Recreation Hall. It had a domino hall on the top floor and a pool hall down in the bottom. And there was an alleyway there on 5th Street between the RT Dennis and Paget building. So it was back in that alley. Well, they were in the worst possible place. And I think numbers, you get varying reports, around 18 people died in that building. But most people are like, it's no big deal. And, another story we talk about that kind of deals with the history of Waco is the Waco Indians had a legend that said that a strong wind or a tornado would never hit Waco, that's the reason the Indians picked the area with the bluffs there in Cameron Park that, you think about back in that time, you got the Comanches and other Indians that, they roam around a little bit. Well, at that time, you didn't want to be around a tornado. So they figured that this area was a great place. And then, it's wild to think that Waco all the way to 1953 never had a tornado that did anything significant. But the first one was an F5 tornado that went right through downtown and killed that many people. So, there's a lot of people that were, they swore by it that, no, it's never going to happen. There's nothing to worry about. The Indians said it wouldn't. And then one of the oral history interviews we used during the documentary, the guy says, yeah, but the Indians are gone now, so that doesn't help us much.
Now, you talked about that. I did find somewhere in in May 27th, 1885, there was a report of a tornado and flooding that killed 11 people in Waco. Didn't really say where that was. I don't know if there's any.
Did you say 1885?
Yeah, 1885.
Yeah. So and that's another thing where where we're talking about the high precipitation stuff. It may have never seen an actual tornado touchdown, but and when you get in the 1800s, a lot more of the deaths were from the flooding concern. Really when the Brazos could come up really quick, particularly the East Waco side. That side of the Brazos River seemed to, I don't know if the elevations is slightly different, but that side seemed to have, when the Brazos really swole, it went into that area and caused a lot of problems.
Which always connected to development, and how each side developed.
Yeah.
That was the more industrial side of the river. Yeah.
So the data I found said since 1952, we average about 2 per year.
Yeah,
Is that
for McLennan County.
McLennan County.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure, again, we talked, I mean, it's an average. So probably some years we have 0 and some we have 4.
Yeah, and
that average is 2.
And here recently, we haven't had a ton in and around the Waco area or McLennan County. But yeah, that's probably a good average. I mean, and most of your tornadoes are going to be those weak ones that don't do, air quotes, weak. I mean, you're still dealing with winds 100 miles per hour, but not your catastrophic style storms.
Right.
But, other than the 53, the day of the Gerald tornado, the first one touched down in McLennan County, in southern McLennan County. But we haven't had any catastrophic style tornadoes. We've had a few strong ones that in my time of being here that we've tracked and looked at, but nothing that, goes in the historic style level.
Right. So I grew up in the Panhandle in in Plainview, Texas, and tornadoes were like the most exciting thing we could do on a weekend, and you could see them coming a mile away. They're, whatever. And it was a big part of the culture up there, but every house had a basement.
Yeah.
Very few houses in Waco have a basement.
Yeah, and that comes down to the soil here. It's just not, advantageous to try to drill through all the rock, and you get the shifting and stuff like that. And when I do talks at schools and stuff, I don't even mention basements when we talk about where to go in a tornado. You got some that have tornado shelters or stuff like that. But yeah, here in Central Texas, and the same thing. You watch, Oklahoma Station cover severe weather. They're like, get underground. That's what they tell them to do. I'm like, we're not going underground. You're going to get a shovel and start digging. But so we talk to the kids about where to get in houses and stuff like that to try to stay safe. But yeah, very few are going to have the basements or tornado shelters to really keep safe.
I just remember when I was a kid, you get in the tub and pull a mattress over you.
Is
that still the standard advice? Yeah.
That sounds funny.
Every night, or is that just tornado nights? I mean, Henderson's a little different
for
place.
A good time.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and honestly, it sounds goofy that would be where you go, but the reason is your way your home's constructed. There's pipes that are in the walls that go to the sink and the bathtub and stuff like that. And last year, we had a EF3 tornado that went down near the town of Salado. And wild story with that, I was actually tracking the storms. I had a pair of friends that their kids played baseball with my son, and I knew they lived around Salado, but I didn't know exactly where. And when I track storms, I've got a little computer that I roll up in front of me, and I can put my phone there in case, my storm chasers or whatever need to go a hold of me, or my wife, which I can't answer. I just see that she texts. But I'm starting to get text messages of, so-and-so's house got hit. The house is destroyed. The kid was in the house. But luckily, they told him to go get in the bathtub. Their house took a direct hit from very catastrophic storm. Nearly every wall fell, and then the entire roof got ripped off. He was in the bathtub and just had some scratches. So,
oh my gosh.
The kind of wild thing. And, you look at the F5 in Gerald, there was a family that got in the bathtub, pulled a mattress on top of them.
Right.
The storm was strong enough, it broke one of their arms in the bathtub. But when they got out, it was the bathtub and one wall. That was all that was left, and they survived it. So it sounds like a goofy thing. And
I'm going to do a drill and see if I can get the mattress in there.
Send pictures, please.
And
post pics.
Yeah, getting the mattress in the door may be the hardest part, or a pillow or a sofa cushion, something like that.
The building construction or residential construction has changed quite a bit. So. Used to it was galvanized pipes or copper pipes in the wall.
Yep.
Everything now is plastic
Tubes,
pipe.
yeah.
It's flex pipe. It's PEX.
Yeah.
And so we've lost some of that structural stability, and most bathtubs are not cast iron anymore.
But what's crazy though is that some of the tornado research has helped building codes to know how boards need to be struck. And that actually, so why we have what's now called the enhanced Fuji scale is because they've learned about that and now changed the scale a little bit of how strong winds can actually cause a house to collapse or that kind of stuff.
Right.
But from storms, we've learned, they weren't building up to code, and that those codes are really important on, how the houses are built and how strong of a wind they can actually take.
Right.
That's amazing. Well, we want to talk about freezes. Rick did some research on freezes here.
We had a few freezes.
Well, and of course, most listening, if you're a local, did the lived event of the most consecutive hours below 32 degrees, and Brady didn't sleep.
No, I lived it. I think I went to work on Saturday, and I think I came home that Thursday. That was, and people always ask, what'd you do? I said, well, they put us in a hotel for a couple of nights, but we actually were. So this was February of 2021. For skip ahead there, but our TV station got a couple hotels nearby, but everybody knew it was so bad. Providence Hospital actually just reserved one whole hotel themselves, so we couldn't even go to that one. And we didn't know, how bad we're going to need it, so we just did night by night. And one night I'm going into the hotel, and it was literally walk in at 11 o'clock, and I'm out at 5 in the morning the next morning. And there's people all in the lobby and sitting in the hallways. We'd been below freezing so bad that people were doing anything they could to try to get somewhere. And they gave my hotel to somebody else and kicked me out, so I had to just sleep at the TV station.
Oh, no.
But we don't have a shower at the station, and try to work 2 or 3 days not showering. I don't look very presentable.
Good thing it's not smell-o-vision.
Oh
Right?
yeah. That high definition, it's hard on you. Yeah.
That was. And talk about that. We've been mainly talking about the Gulf and how it affects our weather. But we do get these crazy northers that come down.
Yeah, and this, we've been in a kind of a weird setup where they've been bad here the last couple of years. But yeah, you get that. I mean, that was true Arctic air that plunged down from way up close to the poles and moved down. And that was a crazy one. I remember 7 days out, we were looking at the model data, and we used 2 long-range models, and one of them was just screaming at us, hey, every day, and actually getting worse every day. And I remember texting a colleague of mine, I was like, there's no way in the world this thing is right. Because, part of telling the story on TV, we see the models, but they can flip-flop and change a lot. And,
it changes. It does. I've noticed that.
Really when you're talking 7 to 10 days out.
So you're never wrong.
No,
the model just changes.
That's why there's percentages on there. It's so funny. I'll put a 20% and I'll get a message from somebody, hey, it's raining 20% on me right now. I'm like, yeah, I got a large area we got a forecast for. But yeah, that one was, just as crazy cold. And then you not only got the cold blast, but typically when we get a cold blast like that, you get that drier air moves in, the rain all moves out. We had wave after wave of that, freezing rain and snow and sleet, and it was just layer after layer of just nastiest. And then you add the whole power grid issue. That was one of the few weather events that I didn't have people complaining at me because they were so mad at ERCOT that they were wanting to figure out how to get a hold of them. So
right.
Typically it's my fault, but that was one that it wasn't.
If I remember right, that's not. There's another point in history. I can't remember exactly when it was, like early 1900s, where we had a similar, almost as long.
There was one in the late I think it was 1899. We had one, and that was the one where I was just looking through. Yeah, that was in February as well, and Waco recorded -5.
That's where the crazy pictures are of people ice skating on the Brazos.
Yeah,
if the Gildersleeve photos of people, out there ice skating.
Yeah. So and that would have been completely crazy. One, you just don't have the insulation and stuff to keep you warm and stuff like that, and then warning that it's coming.
Skates.
Yeah.
I didn't even think to do that in that February. I wonder if we could have done it, gone down to the Brazos. Brazos didn't freeze solid. I don't expect.
No, I don't. We didn't get much. Yeah. I did see some pictures of Lake Waco that had some ice towards the edges.
There were lots of buildings you could ice skate it in.
Yeah. And there were some of our western counties that had some stock tanks that got cold enough that they could walk across. But yeah, that was an interesting event for sure.
So one of my favorite historical weather events, if you ever read about Santa Anna marching his troops into Texas, headed to San Antonio to have it out at the Alamo. And they got hit by a norther in kind of that boundary area between, Rio Grande area. A lot of his troops were from the Yucatan, right? They were subtropical inhabitants, and they had very little clothing, and they get hit with a norther that dumped a foot or more of snow on them, and actually killed a bunch of them. It was just they were so unprepared for it. So. But that's how unpredictable our weather can be. We can have these crazy northers.
Yeah, we like we were talking climate versus weather. We've had times where bluebonnet's been on the ground and had snow, and then we've had our first 100-degree day on record is all the way in March. So we can see some wild, crazy swings for sure.
What's the difference between a northern and a polar vortex?
So polar vortex, you get
Polar vortex sounds really cool, by the way. I like it.
Nowadays with media, you get all these fancy terms, the polar vortex, or, the key one this year was the atmospheric river. You get these terms that catch people's attention. And all the polar vortexes, you got, the jet stream works around the poles, and you'll get little dips in the jet stream or weather disturbances, and they typically rotate around. And if one can break off and push farther south, and that and a northern are kind of the same thing. Now you'll get, just because we get north winds behind a cold front, where that air comes from. So sometimes it's just out of Canada. Sometimes it can pull all the way from Alaska, or, all the way from the poles. So it's just how strong the system is and how cold the air it's pushing in.
And this is a total aside, but when did they start naming all these storms? And what's the history on that?
So, the hurricanes they've named
Long time.
Now the Weather Channel has been starting to, the names of winter storms, that's completely the Weather Channel. So that is, hey, we put a name on it. People want to, care about it. It's just like hurricanes. We put a name. Everyone, they care more about it, than saying, oh, a weather system's moving in. So that most of your National Weather Service and TV stations, other than the Weather Channel, don't name these other storm systems. But I think that, was it Uri, or I don't think, that may have been the 2021 one that they put the name on. So I'll hear people mention it that, but yeah, that was literally hey, how can we get people to talk about winter storms? Let's put a name on it. And then that, that's the TV side of just trying to get ratings, really.
Okay. I think we should name droughts. Yeah.
We'd have some bad names that we couldn't say on TV about those.
That's right.
Well, you mentioned hurricanes. I mean, we do have them come through Central Texas.
Yeah, and they can cause just a completely different setup, and it can be just a few, less than 100 miles can make a big difference. So if a hurricane hits, say, around Galveston and moves up the Texas coast, we can actually see a big heat wave here. So the same year, 2005, same year as Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita looked like it was going to move right up the I-35 corridor, bring us a big event. But every forecast shifted it a little bit to the right. And you want to talk about a blown forecast. So, everybody still had kind of the shock and awe from Katrina. Everyone's running and getting generators. We literally had people getting in a fist fight at HEB over a loaf of bread with that storm moving in. Well, it shifted and pretty much moved right up the Texas-Louisiana line. We didn't get a drop of rain.
Right.
But if you think away the air circulates around a hurricane, we were on the drier side, the western side. So we broke record high temperatures, and everyone's like, oh, where's this hurricane you were getting us all compared? But we can either get big heat waves if they move to our east, but if they move up I-35 or across just west of there, we can get some of the biggest rains that we've ever had, because typically it'll pull the rain in, and a hurricane, as it gets away from the ocean, will kind of slow down, and it can just dump a ton of rain in our area if we get the right location for it.
Wow. So this is an aside also, but since you did one, I'll do it. So what is it like to be in a profession where you predict so publicly, and just as the nature of the profession, you're gonna the model's gonna change.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna use that with my wife. I'm not wrong. The model just changed.
You can use history models. Well, the history model was wrong.
It changed.
You kind of grow a thick skin with it, I guess. Luckily in Central Texas, most of the people will, there's always the joke, weatherman gets it wrong half the time and still keeps their job. I always joke with them. I was like, how many times was your doctor wrong on something? And
does it hurt? I just want to know. Emotionally, does it?
No, I can take those jokes well. The ones that bother most of us the most is how literally mad people get when we interrupt their programming. So and people will be like, oh, you're on TV saying the same thing over and over and over again. Well, yeah, we got, sometimes there's a whole bunch of storms, and maybe it's one, but people don't realize too that we're a free over-the-air broadcast company, so we have government regulations that we have to hit when it comes to keeping people safe with potentially deadly storms. So just here recently, we had a storm that had several tornado warnings, and the CMT awards were going on.
Oh,
so,
goodness.
Yes. So I had some, and that's our prayer that the year that our station gets the Super Bowl, that hopefully nothing happens on it. But yeah, that gets hard, but luckily our management at Channel 10, they back us up and deal with it. And yeah, I'll get people mad, but that's usually the one where covering up I've had people, we covered up a rerun of a storm for tornadoes, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? But But like I said, as you are in the business long enough, you grow thick enough skin and just deal with it. I mean,
Right.
can't make everybody happy.
It's got to build character because it's not like you're anonymous either.
Yeah. Now the one that gets it the worst is my son, because everybody will ask him weather questions, and that generation doesn't watch TV at all. I don't know the last time he watched me, but everyone will ask him questions. But he's got to the point where he just makes something up and tell him something and keep walking. So
Well, that's basically what you do, right?
yeah,
just make it up.
Because everyone, it's when people see me, that's all they know me for is the weather. So that's
Right.
they'll ask me questions or joke about something, and you kind of have those quick little liners that you can tell people. So
Yes. The repertoire of jokes is probably getting pretty old at this point in your life. Hey, so one piece of weather that we haven't talked about related to thunderstorms, hail.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a major factor, and financially a major factor in Central Texas.
Yeah, and like go back to the 53 tornado, that same day there was people that said there was hail up to softball size with the storms. And we can get major hail producing storms here. Last year with the same day the Salado tornado, we had a hailstone that was over 5.5 inches in diameter.
Oh my gosh.
Luckily it landed in someone's front yard, so it didn't do any major damage. But when you start talking financially, everyone talks tornadoes, but hail typically does. That does more monetary damage, and then flooding. Actually, if you go all across the country and average everything out, more people die from floods than they do from tornadoes as well. That's typically,
Right.
But tornadoes get all the attention just because of how destructive they can
But
be.
a lot of flooding is delayed.
Yes,
because of the
and being around the
runoff
Brazos,
effects,
I mean,
yeah.
it definitely has putting the dams in. They still the Brazos doesn't swell as bad now, particularly in the Waco area. Now you go south of the dam and go through areas like Downsville and some of the southern parts of McLennan
Right.
County, they will see that bigger swell and bigger impacts. But
Right.
that runoff impact. I guess the most interesting thing now in Waco is just all the debris that goes into the river, and they've got to clean it out when everything, you kind of see how it all works into that area for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I remember. Were you still at Baylor when they had the big hailstorm in the 90s?
No.
Okay. Yeah,
It's not just us, though. If people are listening, go ahead.
Well, and I don't remember the exact date.
We haven't scared them away by this point into it.
But I was sitting out in my car with my girlfriend, then soon to be wife, Elizabeth, and we hear this rumble coming, and it was late night. We were studying. I promise. I swear we were studying.
He's
And
doing air quotes. You
and
can't see him, but he's
outside the engineering building, and
so romantic.
I we hear the rumble. And growing up in the Panhandle, I'm like, I think I know what that is. And I get out of the car and start running. And my wife, or future wife, I forgot about her.
Oh no!
And so she's standing outside the car looking up. I'm like, run! And these big stones start hitting around us and popping on the ground. And she doesn't let me forget about that.
Yeah,
I
really.
left her hanging there. And I remember that storm. It denuded a bunch of the trees, knocked, gave people broken arms who were riding their bikes back to back to their apartments or whatever. I mean,
She chose to have your children.
Well, there's some other good qualities she chose to.
Yeah, and
you focus on.
You'll hear people talk about the sounds they hear around tornadoes and stuff like that. But there's nothing that when you get a big hailstorm, even a tennis ball sized piece of hail sounds like bowling balls falling from the sky. It's
crazy,
eerie, and just it sounds like the world's coming to an end when that happens.
So as a meteorologist, do they make you sit through all those storms just to learn them all, what it's like to be in the middle of them?
No, it's funny because that we have storm chasers we send out, and I got to do that some before I became chief, and it's fun because you actually see what now weather to me is just a radar and different colors and stuff like that. But when we did meteorology in school, we always would joke sometimes, are we talking about weather, or is it just all math that we do here? So there's a lot of math that goes into the physics side of it. But they would always get on to us because you'd have to make some pretty good road trips from College Station to go see the good storms, and wouldn't get any sleep and come back to school the next day.
All the good ones are in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
It's the biggest tourist industry in Oklahoma. Okay, so let's talk more about events that actually happened and when they happened, and maybe some of the effects on the local area. So flooding, you've mentioned that a few times. One of the first ones I found recorded was this, we talked about a minute ago, the May 27th, 1885 tornado and flood. It did a whole $200,000 worth of damage.
Mm-hmm.
I think the dollars were different then, but
They were.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's, I think people realized as Waco developed that East Waco was very vulnerable. I think they built dikes, they built some other stuff, some protection to try to protect that side of the river. But then found out again in 1913 that it was all for naught. That the right sequence of storms.
Yeah.
You kind of talked about that a minute ago. It wasn't just the rain here, especially when we're talking about a river. It's the rain upriver.
Yeah.
That has a huge effect.
Yeah, and that's usually when we see our worst. And like I said, when you think the Brazos, it's really kind of goes from here up to the west side of Fort Worth. So, when that was any of those storms, that's now you think you've got, Lake Whitney, and then you've got Granbury Lake, and then you got Possum Kingdom. So you've got several that can hold the water,
right.
If need be. But that was before any of that stuff. And you could get a lot of runoff and cause the flooding to last for days and days, and that gets to where it causes problems too.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 1913, there's a big flood. 1936, there's a big flood. I've seen images of those two.
And 36 was the one that really, because from what I saw, there were some at least small dams that busted out, and so that one was the one that really got the gears turning. The problem was then you had World War II, and then we had some droughts and stuff like that. So it took a long time even after that. But that 36 flood was the one that started pushing they did do Lake Whitney. That one was a little earlier than Lake Waco. So, that one helped out a lot. But yeah, that 36 flood was the one that really got the ball rolling on, hey, we got to protect this and, keep having the flood issues like they were having.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The 1913 one, just to go back to that one real quick, that was right when they were trying to put in the lock and dam system to make the Brazos navigable as a way to move goods from here to the coast. And it rerouted the river, right?
Yeah.
As the floodwaters receded, the channel moved about a mile away from where they were building these locks and dams. And they still sit out in the middle of a pasture today.
My students, I go on Google Earth and show them where the lock and dam system is, and it's a long way from the river.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And then you mentioned Whitney Dam. It's a testimony to how long it takes to get things done in government. I mean, which is true when we talk about Waco Dam and Whitney Dam and all these projects, and really even getting a road fixed today. But when it was built in 51, it's when it went online. They often say, so in 1957, they had a similar rain event that could have or should have caused East Waco to flood, but that's when it didn't, and so it's commonly thought of as
and like you said, I think of 55, we're in drought. Right?
Yeah. So and that's the nice thing with the lakes is they're built to have normal conservation levels, but then they build in a kind of a flood area that they try to tell people not to build in that certain area, so it can take on that water. But then the other problem we'll have sometimes with the Brazos now, where it may not go down because you start looking up the line where they need to let water out of certain lakes to get it down. And, really particularly Lake Whitney's got a lot of room where it can flood. Granbury Lake's not, it doesn't have as much of an area. So sometimes they have to release a ton out of that. It'll work its way down, keep our levels. Or right now, if you're in downtown Waco, it's more just the speed of the river that it impacts, not as much bringing the river up a bunch. It probably can come up 5 to 8 feet, sometimes cover up the walkways and stuff like that, but not where it's going to cause any structural issues in town.
Yeah, I can tell how the reservoirs are doing because I'll go out on Lake Brazos, as we call it now, in my kayak, and sometimes it goes upstream. And so I'm realizing there's not big releases coming down because I'm actually going the wrong direction.
Yeah, they let it, and that's the problem we run into with a drought like this is the Army Corps, just to way the water rights work and keep everything moving, they constantly release at least a little bit of water out of the lakes, even when it's completely dry like this.
Yeah, they have to.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you started putting the numbers together, millions of gallons per day that come out. But yeah, the flow of the Brazos can, it was back when the Iron Man started coming here. It just happened to be every time they come, we'd have a big rain, and trying to swim in that river with a big current wouldn't be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I actually did that one time when, for a triathlon. It was not fun. So.
Well, Rick, y'all were monitoring that for Waco, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what was going
Well, I
on in the
mean, we
river?
the water quality and several different things, but the flow was a big part of that too, just to make sure it was safe. But yeah. Yeah. So flooding, the opposite of a flood is a
Drought.
drought.
Nailed it.
Man, that's good. So
I assume that was from me.
yeah. So we've had significant droughts. You talked about everything's an average when we talk about climate, but the reality is life is not an average. So we have some huge swings. What's that look like on a rainfall standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, you have some years where you get, half of what we typically would see sometimes. And, and a lot of times a drought, when you're talking a certain year, just depends on when it occurs, and that's the other thing of averaging stuff out. You could have what looked like a normal rain year, and it's all 1 month. You had too much rainfall in one event, and it made it look fine. And another fun part of my job is, no matter when rain falls, it's good for some people, but not others. Because if you're a farmer and it happened to fall right when you need to cut the corn or go out and cut the wheat, or hey, I cut hay and then the rain fell and it rotted it all. But I always tell my guys, rain's always a good thing, but you're never going to make everybody happy. Because if you say that rain's not good, then they call me up saying, you city guys don't know what you're doing with, So rain's always a good thing, but no one's happy with it. But yeah, a drought, typically they're multi-year events where you just, and the bad thing is a drought can sometimes get strong enough where it can change the overall weather pattern some, where, back in 2011, it was a good example of that, where, it just, the heat and the dryness that we had built in and actually built the high pressure even stronger over us and locked in. And, it's when we had 90, 100-degree days. And it was, and 1980 was another year that was kind of like that, where we had a lot of heat that built in and the drought was bad. But, yeah, it's kind of that, yo-yo effect. You just kind of drought to flood, drought to flood, and it kind of all evens out gradually. Right.
Yeah, out west of town, I've got a little farm, and part of it's got some good bottom land, but some of the land is up out of the bottom lands. It's a lot more gravelly and really more rock than dirt. And I asked my farmer, Corey Westerfield, one day, he's like, "Man, why do you keep putting corn there and down in the bottoms?" He's like, "Well, in the wet years, that's actually the best. You get the best production there because it doesn't get drowned out."
Yeah.
So he's playing the averages, right? So he's going to plant the whole thing and then see what the weather does and hope some of it works out.
So right now we're in drought, and this is the historian asking this question. So when is it going to end, Brady?
We're transitioning, and that we could go on a whole episode talking about El Nino and La Nina, but we've been in a La Nina pattern the last 3 years, and that's kind of fed into the drought concerns here. But we're in the process transitioning to more of an El Nino, which typically is a wetter style pattern for us. So, and this is another where, talking about differences in where you live, the eastern parts of our viewing area, you just go 50 miles or less east of I-35 and they're not in a drought.
No.
So that's where, you can get just extremes on that. But yeah, we should hopefully, gradually start to get out of it.
What's a day? Could you give us a day?
Yeah. Knowing my luck, since I've got everything planned for May 11th, that's going to be the day that we're going to, there's 2 days that we don't need storm. Well, I got May 9th because we're doing our premiere, but yeah, May 11th. And then next year, whatever, it's April 8th or 9th, the day of the eclipse. Yeah. Those are 2 days we're rooting for sunny skies.
Crossroads episode.
You talk about the disparity across the county. Again, so often when rain comes through McLennan County, it's on the east side of Waco and not the west side.
That a lot of times that just, there's some timing that goes into how storms form, but like I said, a lot of that's just how muggy the air is. You've got more humidity east, so storms will build and kind of work there, and then have more time to predict more.
So I pulled the averages for Mart versus Crawford, and it was a good 3-inch difference yearly. Yeah, that's the average.
Yeah, and you don't think that's a big deal, but 3 inches can make a huge difference in what kind of crops you can plant and how much of an impact it has.
Yeah. So 22 was a dry year.
Mm-hmm.
So again, looking at the data for that, it is still not the driest year we had. 1917, we only had, so in 22, we had a little over 20 inches of rain, almost 21, which is a lot less than the 36
or so that is normal.
We're supposed to get. In 1917, they had 13.6 0.4 inches of rain.
And you think no irrigation to help of anything, and how bad that was.
Oh gosh! And so then 1954 was the next one, about 15 inches. 56, we talked about that drought already a little bit. 63, 51, 99 was another one. So anyway, so 22, which was the most recent one we all have in memory, as bad as it still was not the worst.
Yeah, and and that's one of those where it nearly, if you kind of have to start in 2021, the fall, and that's what really got it. So we had a very dry end of the year, and then that started kind of the drought that continued all the way, and that's what really hurt the lakes. Is we haven't had a great start to the year, but we've been a little below average. But the lakes, the stress isn't high on them when you're in the wintertime months. But last year we were so dry in the fall that it just kept falling steadily, even through the cooler times of the year, and really set us up for a bad setup as we went into the summer. But yeah, it's like I said, they're normally anywhere from 1 to 5 years sometimes that they can have the impacts. But yeah, the impacts that they felt back in those the early 1900s compared to what we have now is definitely extreme.
Right. And just looking at month by month data in 2015, October of 2015, we had over 15 inches of rain in that 1 month.
So if I remember that one right, I can remember driving in our weather chase vehicle on LaSalle, and the water was so high it nearly came up to our window. That's how bad the flooding. That was right around Memorial Day. So it was late or Labor Day as well. But we had even with the dams and stuff in place, went to Brazos Park East,
right,
and the water was all the way up where you couldn't even see the boat ramps going in. That was how high, but never got to where it really caused any concerns in town. But we were talking to some of our newer reporters. They were like, how long is it going to take the lake to recover? Is it going to be years? And I was like, no, you'll be surprised. It'll be a snap of the finger, and then it will jump right back up, just because all it takes is a big rain, between here and Stephenville to get the Bosque going, and you can catch so much water. But we need the water in advance so that the ground's not soaking it all up. That's the problem we have right now, is the land's so dry that it can soak up a bunch, and then you don't get the runoff that goes in the river or into the lakes.
Right. Yeah, we talked about the dams being the solution to the flooding, but it was also the solution to the drought.
Yeah, it helped out a lot. Yeah,
it's doing double duty, and Waco was very wise. The leadership was, when they built Lake Waco, they actually reserved all the water rights, and really puts us now as a community in a great spot. You hear about the other communities in Texas that are running out of water.
Yeah,
a lot of them have to buy their water from other sources, and we're actually in control of our own destiny as long as we get rain.
And I don't know all the details, but they even have some of the Brazos River as well, because
absolutely.
They're talking about now trying to see how much they possibly as a backup alternative. But yeah, you can go in Bell County. They're already starting to set up pipes that could move more water towards the Austin area, out of that area. But,
right.
But yeah, and the crazy thing though, like Lake Waco now, I don't remember, it was in the 90s or early 2000s when they raised the level 7 or 8 feet. With that, they created the Waco wetlands, because when they flooded it, it messed up a bunch of the ecosystems around there.
Right.
But now it's so low that they can't pump any water in. So Waco wetlands have not been wet for a while. So
they're dry again. But that was 03.
03, yeah. So there's already talks now that they may, with this drought showing how much water resources we need for everything, that there's been talks that the city may or county may want to raise it even more to possibly hold more water, because we're not anywhere close to like lowest level since they raised it, but I mean we're at 57 feet right now, so one of the lowest percentages that the lake's ever been since it got built.
Right. But it's I've been around some of those discussions. If you raise it, think of the way a lake is built. Now you just create more surface area, and now you just increase your evaporation effect.
Rate.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons to raising the lake.
And you've got a lot of you raise it that maybe all your boat docks aren't going to be usable, and then there's a lot of impacts that
the parks have
and
to be
stuff
redone,
like that, and and then there's a lot of things that would have to be changed and done for just a little. You don't think about, because we'll get those droughts and we're like we're losing a bunch of water, but you can't tell the lake's dropped a bunch. But now that we're down to where it's more the middle of the part of the lake, it really can drop real fast when you talk about the levels.
Right.
Well, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we did.
And if you don't like what's in this episode, you just wait a second and it changes.
There you go. That's kind of the weather pun. Yeah, there you go.
That's what I thought they said.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what.
Yeah, I think one of the ironic things about our climate is we've made Texans the worst drivers on snow and ice in the world.
We actually, funny with the 2011 one, one of our meteorologists he's from Indiana that used to work, and we've sent him out in it because he was the only one that knew how to drive in it. So, I don't, though, but we always joke about that. But when you go farther north, it's not the ice storms. They're dealing with snow. When you just get a snowpack, it's a lot different driving on. Nobody drives good on ice. So, I mean, they make fun of us and all of us freaking out. But
and to be fair, they have infrastructure to deal with it. Yeah. They've got plows. They've got salters.
Yeah. And they also can't survive 90-degree temperatures either,
Or wimps.
Yeah, they got heat waves, but they also don't have air conditioning in some of the houses. But, so you give different types. They can deal with it a lot better.
Did he say air conditioning?
Well, yeah, that's one of Rick's trigger words when he hears air conditioning. He launches into diatribes about air conditioning.
Well, I'm just saying that it's an important part of our history. So,
whole new episode right there.
Yeah, but it did. I mean, if you're going to bring it up, I mean, but the heat in the South, in particular, prevented a lot of the development. So until we had refrigeration and air conditioning, that's one of the things that brought the mass immigration south.
So one of the really crazy stories that we'll tell in the documentary is of a man that was an electrician and was putting fans up in the RT Dennis building the day the tornado hit, because they were kind of in that time frame where you're adjusting from winter to spring. But he was on the outside of the building and actually rode the building down. So,
oh my gosh.
So he wrote a letter. It was in the papers, but his gave it to his daughter and stuff. He's passed away a long time ago, but yeah, he rode down on the outside of a building down. But it kind of interesting air conditioning. But he was out putting, and there were a lot of people. It was so hot and muggy that day. They had their windows open, and and that they could kind of feel the storm coming in as it worked in.
Well, that actually, because of the pressure difference that a tornado creates, that collapses or blows up a lot of buildings.
Yeah,
right?
and
so that was probably
There was another story from the oral history program. We couldn't fit it in the documentary, but that was, they were talking about opening the windows, and their grandmother was like, "No, I don't want my stuff wet." But then the storm hit and their house started shaking real bad, so they just ran out on the front porch. So like, we didn't know where to go, so we just ran out there. But he literally picked their house up and shifted it and set it back down, knocked all of them off the front porch, but apparently got it lifted so much that a tree in the backyard blew and the house set back down on top of it. So, but yeah, it was one of those just kind of crazy stories of, one, you didn't know what was coming, two, you didn't really know what to do when it came, but they said that, they all just took off running and they were afraid the whole house was going to collapse down on top of them.
Right.
So Brady, give that's a great full circle to kind of where we started. How can folks see A Monster from the Sky?
Yeah, so it'll air on KWTX on May 11th, the anniversary. We'll have it on our website and likely on our YouTube page as well once it all gets put together. But yeah, it'll air on the anniversary. So this year is the 70th anniversary of it.
And y'all have got support. It's commercial, isn't it true?
Yeah, we're good. Commercial free. We got partnered up with Texas Farm Bureau. They're helping to kind of cover some of that. So yeah, it'll be an hour long, and it'll air on we're actually going to cover up our 6 o'clock newscast that day. So it'll air from 6 to 7 o'clock on air. And you were talking about partners. The Texas Collection and the Oral History Program at Baylor. I mean, this would have not been done. Jeff Hunt. He's probably so fed up with me dealing with, because like I said, I had so much fun just hearing his stories, and I also figured out that I'm in the wrong profession, because you walk in the Texas Collection, there's never a stressful day there. It's all, man, so calm, and just, I'm like, but yeah, so
it's a veneer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right. So yeah, and then we'll have several oral history
that's great
that are fit in there, and some people that kind of have some Waco people know, Lyndon Olson Sr., Roger Conger, we have him in the documentary as well. So there's some of those names that people know of for Waco history and stuff like that.
Right.
All right, great. Well, Brady, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This is great.
Taking time with us.
Yeah, we're going to have like 100 weather questions after this that everyone, that's usually when they sit me down. They're like, "Oh, so why is this, and this?" But y'all fit a bunch of them in.
We will make the listeners sit in for that part. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Waco History Podcast. Like what you heard? Subscribe, rate, and review our show on iTunes so we can reach more listeners. You can find show notes and info on every episode at wacohistorypodcast.com and more info on Waco's past at wacohistory.org. Our theme music, used with permission, is Cross the Brazos at Waco, performed by the late Billy Walker. For more info on Billy's music, go to billywalker.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. This has been a Rogue Media Network production.